A year after Russia waged its war on Ukraine, the course of the conflict may depend now on China. U.S. intelligence suggests Beijing is considering providing Russia with lethal aid, a move CIA Director William Burns says would prolong a vicious war of aggression. Through private, high-level diplomatic channels, National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan says the U.S. has made clear how it would respond.
We're just laying out both the stakes and the consequences, how things would unfold.
Sullivan not saying publicly what those consequences would be, but sanctions come to mind. They've been central in the West's strategy for punishing Russia, but haven't delivered the devastating economic blow, at least not yet, that was promised when they were imposed. A report by the Center for Strategic and International Studies predicts the sanctions will eventually take a larger toll. But so far, quote, Russia's budget deficit will likely remain manageable, and even if Russia's defense spending peaks at 5% of GDP, Russia will still have resources to fund its war in Ukraine. But sanctions on China, with the second largest economy in the world, would almost certainly hit harder.
Look at the amount of trade between Russia and China. They love to cross over 200 billion. Well, but you're doing $600 billion of business with the U.S. or more, and that's not even to mention Europe and Japan and South Korea and all those other U.S. allies that would be alienated.
Lyle Goldstein, director of Asia engagement at Defense Priorities, says he's concerned China's been preparing for years to take that kind of hit as it eyes a potential invasion of Taiwan. Goldstein noting the U.S.'s strategy of declassifying intelligence of China, considering the lethal aid, may backfire.
If you sort of box the Chinese in and say you can't do this, then you've kind of put them in a situation where if they don't do it, then they're seen as backing down to the U.S.
China weighing a decision with the potential to impact nearly every corner of the globe, the most immediate and deadliest consequences falling on Ukraine. In Washington, I'm Atrel Nashar reporting.
Alright, Shalom. I want to start out with praise, honor, and glory due to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, HaKadosh. I'd like to give double honors unto the apostles and the elders of Great Millstone, who I learned this truth from. And I'd like to say peace and salutations unto the hopefully elect. And today I just want to go into this article, and the title reads, U.S. warns China of stakes and consequences for providing Russia with lethal aid. So, Lord willing, this lesson is edifying and straight to the point. I'm going to make this quick. As the video states, the U.S. is upset, that China is pretty much helping its ally, with aid, because Russia and China are allies, So I'm just going to bring out a couple scriptures. I'm going to start in the book of Psalm chapter 55 and verse 21. And it says, the words of his mouth were smoother than butter, but war was in his heart. His words are softer than oil, yet were they drawn swords. And yes, that's pretty much what Esau Edom does, He speaks smooth things, but, in reality, he's ready to, draw the sword. He's ready to take you down, especially those that, that pretty much don't adhere to his laws and his legislations, That's pretty much what's taking place, World War III is ramping up. Then I'm going to go to the book of Ecclesiastes, chapter 3 and verse 8, and it says, a time to love and a time to hate, a time of war and a time of peace. And yes, that's the time that we're in right now, a time of war, Things are wrapping up. World War III is at the door, because there's still two major prophecies that have to take place, which is the mandatory implementation of the mark of the beast, which is, the RFID, CHIP, which is spoken of in the book of Revelation, chapter 13 and verse 16, and the prophecy of the destruction that's going to come upon Babylon the Great, America. Those are the two major prophecies that have to happen, before ultimately the elect can be saved, And it's the book of Matthew, chapter 24, and verse 6. And it says, And ye shall hear of, Slakia, and ye shall hear of wars, and rumors of wars. See that ye be not troubled. For all these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet. And yes, these things must come to pass, but the end isn't yet until, those two prophecies come to pass, Those are the two major prophecies, the mark of the beast being implemented and the destruction taking place, simultaneously with our Lord Yahweh Shai making his second coming, And it's the book of Revelation, chapter 11 and verse 14, and it says, The second woe is past, and behold, the third woe cometh quickly. And yes, that's what's happening. The third woe, which is World War III, the war to end all wars, because you had World War I, World War II, and ultimately World War III is going to take place. And it's going to be the last war to ever be fought on the face of the earth, But that's the time that we're living in again, a time of war. The other nations, they hate Babylon. They hate America. And ultimately destroy it, and leaving it desolate. I was going to end it, but I'm going to end it with this. This is the book of Revelation, chapter 9 and verse 16. And the army of and the number of the army of the horsemen were 200,000, and I heard the number of them. And thus I saw the horses in the vision, and them that sat on them, having breastplates of fire, and of jacinth and brimstone. And the heads of the horses were as the heads of lions, and out of their mouth issued fire and smoke and brimstone. By these three was the third part of men killed, by the fire, and by the smoke, and by the brimstone, which issued out of their mouths. For their power is in their mouth, and in their tails, for their tails were like unto serpents, and had heads, and with them they do hurt. And that's pretty much describing those ICBM missiles, because there are going to be so many of them, and describing exactly, what they look like, because once they're, launched, they're going to leave, the atmosphere, leave the ozone layer, pinpoint, their specific target. They're going to come back down to the earth, on fire because they're going to be traveling so fast, you know. And they're going to have that rocket system propelling them, you know, towards, you know, America. So that's it. You know, I'm going to end it. This is like his Lord willing, this lesson was edifying. I want to give all praise, honor, and glory due to Yahweh. Bahashem Yahweh Shai, Bahashem Makakwatash. I'd like to give double honors unto the apostles and the elders of Great Millstone, who our land is true from. And I'd like to say peace and salutations unto the hopefully elect. Till the next time I see you, Shalom.